three Irishmen caught in the chaos of the Colombian Civil War. If convicted, each faces up to 20 years in prison. It's a story that has ramifications for two peace processes thousands of miles apart. Three Republicans from Ireland accused of supplying terrorist expertise deep inside the South American jungle. So just what were they doing here for a month with one of the most feared and ruthless guerrilla armies in the world? Tonight, Spotlight reports from Colombia, where we investigate the evidence against the three men. The most serious charge against them is they're suspected members of the Provisional IRA, caught coaching left-wing guerrillas in bomb-making. All three deny the charge, but the Colombian government is convinced the men have a case to answer.
In any case, they were not doing good things. If you know their past, they are regarded as terrorists, members of the IRA. So we can think that they were not doing teaching English, for instance. But now they are under investigation. We have to expect, or we have to wait for the result of this investigation.
But investigating the truth in Colombia is a difficult task. The capital, Bogotá, is the most dangerous city in the world. As well as a haven for narco-terrorists, it's the kidnap and assassination capital of South America. Add to that a civil war, and corruption, rumour and propaganda are all part of the local currency.
All services, all intelligence services around the world magnify the results, and here in Colombia much more. There is a critic very common here that the intelligence of the army is very bad. So get one result and they have to make a big noise, making more noise than the reality.
The three have been detained by the country's Attorney General's office, the Fiscalia. It has until April to gather enough evidence to bring them to trial. Already the RUC has been in Colombia helping build the case against the men.
The Irish officials came with a very important package. I don't know what it says, but I know that the Irish officials have been in contact with Colombian prosecutors, and some officials have given testimonial evidence about the Irishmen.
What is not in dispute is that the men flew into Colombia at the end of June. Two of them entered from Paris and were joined several days later by the third, who flew in from Venezuela. From Bogotá, they took an internal flight into the heart of the guerrilla-held territory. Their first port of call was the frontier town of San Vicente. The town is the gateway to the rebel-held zone in southern Colombia. The guerrillas were granted control of a vast swathe of land by the government as an inducement to join the peace process. When the three men flew into the zone, they entered the complex and volatile world of the Colombian Civil War. The guerrilla territory is known as Farclandia, after the rebels who control it. It's guerrillas like these behind me the three men are accused of training. They're from the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC. This Marxist-inspired group is the largest and oldest guerrilla army in Colombia. Its 17,000 fighters are well armed, and for the past 37 years it's been locked in a bitter three-way conflict with the Colombian government and right-wing paramilitaries. The main crop in the region is coca, the raw material of cocaine. The guerrillas turned to the lucrative drugs trade worth hundreds of millions of pounds a year after support from the Soviet Union dried up.
I'm prepared to say this to the BBC, not to anybody else. In Colombia, I would not broadcast this anywhere. The main leaders of drugs cartels in Colombia are from FARC. FARC allows drugs to be cultivated. FARC is amassing a great profit.
Puede que los dueños sean narcotraficantes.
The government forces who face the guerrillas are trained with US dollars. America plans to spend more than $1 billion in military aid to fund a battle against drugs, while at the same time bankrolling a war against left-wing rebels. Added to the mix are the right-wing paramilitaries. One of their tactics is to launch terror attacks against peasant villages. Their campaign is backed by units of the Colombian military and police. Exactly what the men were doing in the FARC-controlled territory is a matter of dispute. What is known is that it was a month before they flew back. When they reappeared at Bogotá's El Dorado airport, there was a reception committee waiting for them. They were surrounded and arrested by soldiers from the Colombian Special Forces. It was soon discovered their passports were false.
The first charge, which has already been proved because they have admitted it, is the use of false documents. Their true identities do not correspond with their passports.
At the time of their arrest, the men claimed they were David Bracken, Edward Joseph Campbell, and John Joseph Kelly. Spotlight has uncovered copies of the Colombian authorities' case papers against the three. The secret documents show just how their true identities were established. The man travelling as David Bracken is in fact Dubliner Niall Connolly. This is a communication from Garda Intelligence in Dublin sent to the British Embassy in Bogotá. It says it appears his passport was fraudulently obtained based on false information. As this death certificate shows, the real David Bracken was a baby who died in Dublin in 1965, just an hour and a half after birth. Connolly had assumed the identity of the dead child. Niall Connolly has no terrorist convictions and has never been in prison. A carpenter by trade, he's been living in Cuba. Another of the men was travelling on a British passport in the name of John Joseph Kelly. His real identity, Martin John Macaulay, was given to the Colombians by the RUC. The day after his arrest, the police visited the County Armagh address on his passport application, but couldn't find anybody by the name of John Kelly. A secret communication sent from RUC headquarters in Belfast to the British Embassy in Bogotá said, "We believe the man purporting to be John Joseph Kelly to be Martin John Macaulay, a native of Lurgan. Martin Macaulay is the sole survivor of the alleged shoot-to-kill policy carried out by the RUC in the early 80s. 2 years ago, he told Spotlight what happened during the controversial shooting at a County Armagh hay shed in 1982.
Whoever was in there, that shed was getting riddled, and it did get riddled. There was 2 shots rang out, Michael Tighe was killed instantly. I seen a guy with a rifle moving across the door. Once he had disappeared, the whole place exploded in gunfire. I moved to get cover to the opposite side of the door, and in doing that I was hit. After that, the door was smashed down and was dragged out.
Shot several times and seriously injured, Martin Macaulay survived. He was later given a 2-year suspended sentence for possession of 3 pre-war rifles uncovered in the hay shed. The third suspect was travelling on a British passport under the name of Edward Joseph Campbell. He's James William Monaghan. According to the secret RUC dossier sent to Bogotá, he had assumed the identity of a man from Belfast who had never applied for or held a British passport. A native of Rathmullen in County Donegal, he was jailed in 1971 for 2 years for possession of bomb-making material. Then, in 1976, he was sentenced to 10 years in the Republic, again for possessing bomb-making equipment. Under interrogation, Monaghan made no attempt to hide his previous convictions. According to the transcripts of their initial interviews obtained by Spotlight, when asked about the false passport, James Monaghan gave the impression that it was common for people in Ireland to have a dual identity.
It's not a genuine passport. I bought it off a friend in Dublin. In fact, I can't remember where I bought it. You know. I mean, considering my past actions, I wouldn't have been permitted to enter Colombia because of the conflict between Britain and Ireland, you know. I mean, in Ireland, lots of people change their identity to shake off the Brits. I mean, it's not considered a big deal to have a false passport in Ireland.
One charge has to do with the forgery of a passport. This has been accepted by them because of the special circumstances in Ireland, which makes some people have a double identity. If there has been any reprehensible behavior because of the forgery of the passports, then let them be tried in Ireland and not here.
This was not the first trip Niall Connolly and James Monaghan undertook together. Their stamps on their false passports show that in July 1999 they spent 2 days in Venezuela before leaving for a brief stopover in Costa Rica. From there their destination was Nicaragua, where they spent 5 weeks before returning via the same route. False passports were not the only fake documents they were carrying. Each had a forged membership card from the National Union of Journalists. Monaghan, who was carrying cameras in his luggage, claimed he was a photographer based in County Antrim. They also had a significant amount of cash between them, in various currencies. Most of it was in American $20 bills. After their possessions were confiscated, they were led off to experience the harsh reality of life in the Modelo prison, itself a battleground in the Colombian Civil War. Colombia's infamous Modelo prison here in Bogotá is reputedly one of the most dangerous penal institutions in the world. On the other side of these walls are some of the most violent criminals in South America. Alongside them are Colombia's notorious narco-traffic leaders, as well as prisoners from the various paramilitary and guerrilla factions. The country's conflict is replicated inside the prison, where full-scale riots and murder are common. And while the perimeter fence may be heavily policed, control inside the jail has been ceded to the inmates. Just days before the Republicans were sent there, an attempted mass breakout was foiled. A tunnel collapse was all that prevented 700 guerrillas from escaping. Overcrowding is a huge problem in the Modelo. The inmates pay rent to sleep in the halls and to use showers and toilets. Weapons are frequently smuggled in. Earlier this year, a gun battle between rival groups left more than 30 prisoners dead.
Riots in that prison are really frequent. They're always taking out hauls of AK-47s, hand grenades, dynamite, pistols, you name it.
One of the prisoners' regular visitors is Anne Barr. A native of Donegal, now living in Bogotá, she took an interest in the men's case after her own friend was wrongfully accused by the military of being a 4th IRA suspect at large in the country. She's the prisoner's point of contact with the outside world.
When I went in there, they didn't know me from Adam. They're really worried about what the media have done with their case, so they're not talking very easily to anyone. It does seem to be very bad and very unjust because, I mean, generally the Western system is innocent until proved guilty, and it hasn't been in their case.
Spotlight visited the men inside the high-security wing of the Modelo prison to see the conditions for ourselves. In the past, visitors have been taken hostage. We were told we entered the jail at our own risk. The 3 men were sharing a small cell with no natural light. Because of the threats against them from right-wing paramilitaries, they had a 24-hour guard. There was no fresh air, and the only window was sealed to prevent hand grenades being lobbed into the cell. Had they been successful, the 700 rebels involved in the mass escape attempt planned to disappear in the barrios and slums of Bogotá and find their way through government lines to rejoin their units in the south. In recent weeks, these rebels have been involved in fresh clashes with government forces. In their own territory, FARC fighters hold sway, launching ambushes and kidnapping foreigners. They are effective jungle fighters, but haven't been as successful in the towns and cities. Open warfare on the streets of Bogotá in 1985 when a rebel group seized the Supreme Court. This attack was carried out by the M19 guerrilla movement. Its leader, who's now a democratic politician, says FARC need the technology necessary for urban warfare.
I suppose yes. I suppose It would be interesting for the FARC to get some of the IRA technology. Mortars, the FARC now is trying to develop a mortar better than the very primitive they have now, very few accurate. And of course, the FARC are trying to get more training in explosives.
The main accusation is that they were exporting bomb-making knowledge from Ireland to South America. But what is the evidence against them?
We have evidence that they were in the FARC zone, that they stayed there for 3 weeks, that they were met there by FARC members.
That they were in the FARC zone is not in dispute, but going to the area isn't a crime. In fact, the Colombian government describes the region as a laboratory for peace, and visiting political delegations are common. The president of the country, Andres Pastrana, has himself visited the area during peace negotiations. So what were the three men doing thousands of miles away from home in the Colombian jungle? According to the transcripts of their interrogations, they said they were there for entirely peaceful reasons.
There were three main objectives to the trip. One was tourism. The other was to get to know about the peace process in Colombia. And the third was to research articles on the peace process in Colombia and general information on nature and animals.
Why did you come to Colombia?
Firstly, to spend some time on holiday. And secondly, to carry out some research for an Irish publication.
What places did you visit?
I don't want to talk about that. I'd like to keep it for my defence.
Give us details of what you did in Colombia.
I want to keep that for my defence.
Raul Reyes is a senior commander in the FARC zone. He supports the men's story.
They just came here to explain the dialogue process. We are interested to know the experiences from other organizations, from other forces which are looking for solutions through dialogue. We explain to them our experiences.
Within hours of his arrest in Colombia, the RUC was sending Macaulay's fingerprints across the Atlantic. The Colombians' belief that they had detained IRA suspects is based on two documents, one from the British Embassy in Bogotá and the other from the RUC in Belfast. Last week, a police spokesman at RUC headquarters at Knock said that, to the best of his knowledge, no one from the RUC had confirmed that the men were members of the IRA. But a secret document sent by the RUC to Colombia tells a different story. It states that Macaulay and Monaghan are known to the RUC as leading members of the Provisional IRA. The other letter from the British Embassy is included in the file of evidence. It says Martin John Macaulay and James William Monaghan are supposed to be members of the Provisional Irish Republican Army, linked to the engineering department, especially in the field of developing and making homemade explosive material. The contents of this letter were put to both men during their interrogation.
It's not true that I'm a member of the Provisional Irish Republican Army, and you would have to ask the British Embassy to prove that accusation.
I mean, the information from the British Embassy is fairly exaggerated. It's about 20 years out of date. I mean, it's not very difficult for an official of any rank in Ireland to link someone to one group or another.
Do you know how to handle arms or explosives?
Well, in the past I would have had some knowledge of arms and explosives, but not anymore. I mean, we're talking 1972, that was about 25 years ago, you know, when I was sentenced in the conflict.
How did you obtain knowledge of arms or explosives?
I was trained by others, people who already belonged to the IRA.
Niall Connolly wasn't known to the police on either side of the border. He has no previous convictions. The British Embassy was unable to identify him, but made the following suggestion. If he is travelling with Macaulay and Monaghan, he could also be a member of the IRA.
In relation to what the British Embassy says about us being members of the Provisional IRA Engineering Department, that is absolute lies. I have never been arrested. I have no criminal record, and I have no convictions.
In a statement, the IRA said its Army Council sent no one to Colombia to train or engage in any military cooperation with any group. The statement did not elaborate whether or not the three are members. So who did they tell the guerrillas they represented?
They said they were from the political section of the IRA.
The political wing of the IRA is, of course, Sinn Fein. After his arrest, Niall Connolly, who'd been living in Cuba, was described by the Cuban Foreign Ministry as the legal Sinn Fein representative in Latin America. In 1996, Martin Macaulay was a Sinn Fein election worker during assembly elections in Upper Bann. This is Jim Monaghan on the stage at a Sinn Féin Ardèche in the late 80s. He shared a platform with the party president Gerry Adams. James Monaghan recently worked with the Republican ex-prisoners group in Dublin. News of the arrests in Colombia rocked the already fragile peace process here. Sinn Féin was accused of cultivating links with narco-terrorists, and its commitment to the peace process questioned. The party insisted the three are not current members.
It's not the business of Sinn Féin why they're in Colombia, so therefore I don't have to give an explanation, but I don't have an explanation, which is the essential point that people need to understand. I don't have an explanation. They were not there on behalf of our party, so therefore I don't have to give an explanation. I don't have one.
In Colombia, rumour can somehow be represented as fact. Following an army press conference, it was widely reported there was videotape evidence of the three men training the FARC.
You said there was video evidence against the men. What happened to it?
No, I do not have that video. I have not handed in any video. I do not know if other officials have handed it in to the prosecution.
Is there a video evidence of the three men with FARC?
No existe. There is no video.
The non-existent video wasn't the only confusing story. On this side of the Atlantic, there were contradictory reports.
They tested a napalm bomb in the jungle. Security sources in Bogota are perplexed by reports they've been developing some form of napalm. The IRA might have been trying to sell some of its stocks of Semtex. The sale of Semtex has been totally rejected by senior security sources.
The origin of the Semtex story was the Colombian military. It claimed it had a tape of an intercepted radio broadcast where rebel leaders discussed how three Westerners were teaching them how to use the IRA's favourite explosive, Semtex. We asked the Colombian journalist who first reported the story if we could listen to the tape.
The source did not allow us to take a copy of the tape out of the office.
Has the tape been heard in Colombia?
¿El cassette se escuchó en Colombia?
No.
¿En algún otro medio?
No.
There is no sign of the tape anywhere. Besides, if the tape existed, the prosecution would have to have it.
The prosecution doesn't have the tape. So what is the Colombian authorities' evidence against the three men? According to the case papers obtained by Spotlight, it's based on forensic and identification evidence. The Attorney General's office claims a witness came forward who had seen Martin Macaulay in the zone before. Spotlight understands the witness in question is being used by the government in at least one other unrelated case. Can you tell us a little bit about the witness?
No mucho.
Not much.
The witness came forward.
Sí. No,
Yes. What was the question?
Ah, sí.
Yes.
And said?
No lo sé.
I don't know.
Did he see this man on the television and say, oh, I think I saw him in the FARC territory?
Mm-hmm.
The key evidence, according to the Colombian prosecutors, is forensic.
We also have the tests carried out by the Colombian authorities and by American and British intelligence, which show particles in the clothes and bodies of people who handle explosives and drugs.
Contrary to what the General says, there are no records of any tests being carried out by the British. The American embassy did, however, supply the equipment used for the first set of tests. The results show that James Monaghan's belongings tested positive for drugs and explosives. The readings for Martin Macaulay were similar. The printout for Niall Connolly said he had been in contact with explosives, but not drugs.
I have never touched explosive material of any kind. The only thing that I can think of is that in the military barracks where the tests were taken, there were guns and little devices that looked like explosive materials on the table before our belongings were left there. If there is some explanation, it must be because of the contamination in that place.
The case documents show the legal permission to conduct the test was sought after they had already been carried out. The forensic results were then handwritten on a blank piece of paper. We asked an independent forensic consultant to comment on the ion track instrument used. He said in the UK they are used for primary screening of items, but the results are not used in court. There was further screening, as at least one other set of tests were carried out by the Colombian police. They proved negative. It remains a matter of dispute which tests are accurate. The men have not been charged with either the possession of drugs or explosives. They've now been moved from the Modelo to this holding centre. Behind the scenes, the Irish government is working hard to find a diplomatic solution. When we caught up with an Irish diplomat, Carl Gardner from the Irish Embassy in Mexico, but working on the case in Bogota, he didn't want to discuss it.
I really can't do it.
What has complicated the three men's case even further is that Colombia is somewhere the Americans consider their own backyard.
Any cooperation with people in Colombia that are challenging the rule of law, that are promoting the sale of drugs, any cooperation with those people raises to the United States extremely, extremely disturbing and important questions.
That warning came from the US before September the 11th, a date which changed the world for everyone, including the three in Bogota. Their story is off the front page, but they still face a 6-month wait before any trial has to be held. Terrorist suspects in a world that has declared war on terrorism.